If you're joining us on a recording, welcome. So we are following along to the Bridgecrew AWS Modernization Workshop, which is at bridgecrew.awsworkshop.io. And whether you are running along at Event Engine, as we are with all the live participants here, so thanks for joining us, or whether you're watching this at a later date or going back through it in your own time, the prerequisites section, like I said, has an at an event environment, which is the Event Engine work setup we've just followed through with Rob. And then there's also how to kind of follow along with this workshop on your own AWS account. So either way is all good. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to effectively, we are at 3215. We've just installed JQ in our Cloud9 environment. We've just installed Python and activated a virtual environment. And so what we can do now is go on to the Bridgecrew setup. Now, we're going to go into a little bit of context. We're going to very quickly set the tone for kind of why and the how and the what of DevSecOps and infrastructure as code security. And we're also then going to kind of cover how that ties into AWS technologies like CloudFormation. If you haven't already set up a Bridgecrew account and you don't already have a GitHub account, both accounts are free. Please do find your way to 3.2 and go ahead and get yourself a Bridgecrew sign-up account. Don't worry about the CLI just yet, but there'll be plenty of time during the kind of DevSecOps and CloudFormation overview to sign up for Bridgecrew and sign up for a github.com account if you don't have one of those as well. Again, thanks to Yaniv and Rob and everyone else kind of, available on this webinar. Please do ask a question in the Q&A or ask in the chat if you have any issues. The reason this is live rather than recorded initially is we'd love the conversation. Don't worry about saving questions till the end. Get those questions in the Q&A panel on the chat, and we can kind of break off and have those interesting little side conversations as we go through. So with that said, I am going to find chat.
Yeah, you should have the link.
I got it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And so I will now be able to, here we go, jump onto that same environment that Rob just set up. And
so, yeah, Matt, like while you're accessing this environment, let's get into a bit of the conversation around DevSecOps. What exactly is that?
Sure. Yeah. So I could just say, hey, let's all go and read the DevSecOps section, but that would be pretty boring, right, for a live webinar. So that's there if you kind of want to kind of go through in your own time and kind of refollow this little bit. And there we go. It's exactly where Rob left off, which is awesome. But yeah, so the idea with DevSecOps is exactly what you might think. And for kind of seasoned, DevOps professionals that are joining us, I'm sorry, this bit might be a bit overstated and well known. But, historically, we had this idea of moving dev and ops teams, which used to be separate and siloed, into one team, and between them, they are responsible for the entire life cycle of a application deployment. So instead of dev only being responsible for the actual application code, and then ops being completely separately responsible for the scaling and the uptime and the maintenance of the infrastructure, that didn't really work, because when those teams work together and are responsible for the whole life cycle, generally things are built better from an operational side and from a development side, and the result is quicker deploys, more stable releases, and just a generally happier team all round, because people aren't spending most of their night looking at PagerDuty, is my personal experience with kind of moving those two teams into one. And with things, DevOps movement, having those teams together, it's allowed that entire life cycle to be automated. So, developers were already running their tests in automated CI runs through things like Jenkins, et cetera, and the modern day version of that, we actually see not only the application tests running, but also the infrastructure tests as well. So with DevOps, you generally see CI/CD pipelines that don't just test the code, they also test the infrastructure that code is destined for. They test whether the deployment's been successful. They do testing in a dev environment, which is a complete, using AWS APIs, for example, a complete replica, a perfect replica using the same infrastructure as code, so CloudFormation or Terraform or whatever infrastructure as code you're using to define your infrastructure, we can add that into the pipeline so that we can go, hey, we know this application is going to deploy successfully in prod because we've just built an entire replica of prod using the same infrastructure.
So Matt, you're saying you don't want to test later in the life cycle or in production?
Generally, I prefer not to test in production unless I'm having a really crazy day. But yeah, like to that point, anything that doesn't really mirror production isn't really a very useful test. The closer you can get to a repeatable production environment, the more likely you are to find issues early. And infrastructure as code allows us to do that, because instead of having kind of manual steps, instead of people clicking around the AWS UI to create environments, and we will be doing a little bit of that today just for demonstration purposes, certainly with things like, our CI/CD pipeline, but all of that can be codified as well. Yeah, infrastructure as code gives this amazing ability to go, we categorically know that this code produces our environment. So we don't just have to have one production environment, we can have as many as we want, some of them for dev, some of them for test. And yeah, I guess to your point, Rob, that's DevOps. Where does security tie into it? And the simple answer is, just like dev and ops got together and life has been better for both of those teams since, the speed at which we now deploy the abilities that things like infrastructure of code and like APIs into infrastructure like AWS has given us means we are deploying way too often and way too quickly with way too many objects for kind of a traditional security approach to keep up. No sooner would a security team have kind of manually gone and inspected whether a deployment was suitable for production. We're probably 6 revisions later, and we've already rolled our code base over, a few times in very high commit environments. So we need to take a leaf out of the DevOps book, and we need to bring security into that conversation and into that automation, so that it's not only our infrastructure tests that are running in an automated fashion, it's not only our application tests that are running in an automated fashion, but it's also catching security issues with the infrastructure itself. Just like we already have scanning on Node.js and Python dependencies in our kind of code security scanning, we need to make sure we're not leaving S3 buckets publicly writable or exposing secrets or misconfiguring EKS clusters to be exposed to the world via their admin dashboards. All those kind of things can and should be automated, so that just like your CI pipeline might say, hey, your code's really rubbish on this line, we can also catch infrastructure security issues in the same way.
Excellent.
Cool.
And I didn't catch that. Could you try again?
That is me taking this particular brand of watch off and doing that, so it doesn't do that for the whole session. Right. And yeah, that's exactly what we are going to talk everyone through. And hopefully by the end of this session, everyone will actually have an automated security pipeline for improving the security posture of their automated infrastructure. We're going to show some tools. We're going to show different places which you can scan that infrastructure and why it matters to scan it at different locations. And more to the point, how to automate the entire thing. So let us get started. Yeah, so we can see we're in this Cloud9 environment. We already have our Python env installed. And for anyone, as I say, that gets stuck, by all means, do shout on the Zoom chat. Do use the chat. We've got a load of people ready to help. So yeah, don't worry about getting behind. Don't worry about being stuck. We've got your back. Equally, if you're watching this on the recording, tweet us or join our Slack channel, and we'd be happy to help with any issues you have with the workshop. So at this point, we are in the Bridgecrew setup of prerequisites. Hopefully you have a Bridgecrew account by now. I think I rambled on long enough about infrastructure as code there, so gave everyone a bit of time. I have myself signed into my new Bridgecrew account here, which I've set up specifically for this workshop. So I'm in the same position as everyone else. I have a brand new Bridgecrew account here. And what we're basically going to do at this point, I'm just going to move this over here so it's nice and easy to get to. We are now at the point where we want to install the Bridgecrew CLI. And because this is written in Python, it's why we have our Python environment activated, and we can just do a pip install Bridgecrew. And once that's happened, downloading the AWS Boto CLI there as a dependency. Once we have that done, we should now be able to run the Bridgecrew command. There we go. And we're getting a version which is currently 8.1.4. So once we have that ready, we are going to need something for this. And this is the Bridgecrew CLI is really useful for kind of manually testing your code, as we'll see in a moment, and also integrating with a number of different CI/CD systems. But the way it talks back to our Bridgecrew platform is through an API token. So we get that by going to our shiny new Bridgecrew dashboard, going into the integration, so the bottom menu item on the left, and then we find API token here, and your API token for your account will be displayed. And so what I'm going to do and again, this is in the next section. If we go into Bridgecrew CLI, you can see we'll need this at a later date in just a minute or so's time. So what I am just going to do is I am going to export this as BC API, and I'm just going to save that there, so that, or you can just write it down somewhere. You know, we could just quickly, for the sake of it, create a new file. And we can just paste it in there so we can copy and paste it later, either way. So now we have that API key. We can hit module 4, which is scanning. So so the token is in the Bridgecrew dashboard, and by all means, James or Peyton will show you where that is. So once we have that, we can hit module 4. And this is kind of showing the very, very essence of what we're talking about when it's infrastructure as code security. So before we go and automate this, before we go and kind of see how easy it is to have this done automatically whenever someone contributes or changes your code base and all the cool things we can do with Bridgecrew and AWS, let's look at the very essence of finding vulnerabilities in your infrastructure as code with the Bridgecrew tools. And to do that, I want to introduce a training code base called CFNGoat. And CFNGoat is purposely vulnerable infrastructure as code. So instead of defining some really useful EC2 VMs and some S3 buckets and EKS clusters, what the CFNGoat GitHub repository is a collection of some of the most badly written, insecure default CloudFormation you can possibly think of. And the whole point of this is it gives us a really good training and resource to kind of show infrastructure as code security in action. So for those that prefer their infrastructure as code a little more Terraformy, we also have TerraGoat, which, as you can imagine, does exactly the same thing. Here we go, which is just, very vulnerable infrastructure as code in Terraform.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, so this is leveraging CFNGoat basically is leveraging CloudFormation. Does it also support any other infrastructure as code platforms?
Not in CFNGoat itself, but we do have a couple of other Goat projects. One of them is CDK-Goat. So if you're also a fan of the Cloud Development Kit, we have a vulnerable AWS CDK demo infrastructure for that as well.
Excellent.
Cool. Thanks for the question. And yeah, everyone in the audience, please do, pick our brains as we go through this. Any questions, just shout. It's more fun than having to listen to me drone on. So we're going to be using the CloudFormation goat for the rest of this workshop. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take a copy of that CloudFormation Git repo into our Cloud9 environment. So simply copy and paste that. We already have Git installed in Cloud9. As Rob said, there's already a load of development tools in this environment. And the great thing about Cloud9 is it means that all of us on this workshop are on the same environment. We have the same dependencies installed. So there's no setup of kind of different Windows versus Mac versus Linux, and someone that comes and is using Solaris, and then we have to do all that dance. So yeah, once we've done that, we can change directory into the CFN goat repo, which is exactly the same as we've just seen in github.com. And then quite simply from here, what we can do is use the Bridgecrew CLI to scan the CFN goat repo for any vulnerabilities or any issues. And there's two ways we can do this by default. We can specify a single file. So cfngoat.yaml is within the cfngoat repo, or we can do -d and tell the Bridgecrew CLI to scan an entire directory. And that will do that recursively. And at that point, Bridgecrew will find any infrastructure as code it supports and scan that. So if it finds Terraform, it'll scan it. If it finds CloudFormation, if it finds CDK, if it finds Kubernetes manifests, Helm charts, serverless framework for AWS, if it finds any of those infrastructure as code styles, it will scan them. You can also limit what it scans, as we are doing here, by passing in a specific framework. So with this, it would only scan CloudFormation it finds. But yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And then before I press enter on this command, this is where we will need our API key. So the API key we've just saved, I can either use the variable that I saved it as, or you can just paste your API key in without the $ into here. And what this is going to do is it's basically going to run the Bridgecrew CLI, but it's also going to send all of the results from the scan to the dashboard so that we can see them easier and kind of sort them and see priority and severity and things like that. And I'll show you that in just a second. So what we can do here, Bridgecrew-D, we're asking it to just scan CloudFormation, pardon me. We're in the CFN goat directory that we've just cloned from GitHub. And what we will see in a moment, after it's done kind of sending all the results to the cloud, is exactly what we're hoping to catch. We're going to see a load of issues related to our purposely vulnerable CloudFormation. So here you go. And I'll go through a couple of these just so you get an idea of the format. So here we go. So every single failed check has a check ID, a description of what the problem is. So in this case, we don't by default have block public policy enabled, which is opening ourselves up for potentially exposing this bucket. Another one here, we don't have block public ACLs enabled. You can see all kind of very sane defaults. We don't have access logging enabled for this S3 bucket. And so, if there was an issue, there was an unauthorized access attempt, we'd have no way of looking at it or going back and inspecting that. And then for each one, we get the actual name of the CloudFormation resource within our code that allows us to easily go and find the resource affected. We then have a location in terms of line numbers within the file. So if you are doing -d and scanning a large number of infrastructure as code files, you know exactly which file it came from and which resource. And then also the snippet of code itself. Now, if that's not enough, let's say, you see this as someone that's kind of very new to security in general or very new to infrastructure as code security. We also provide these guidance links, which for each of the issues is designed to be a bit of like a virtual security ambassador on your team and kind of give some context as to why this matters and, how you would manually remediate this if this is a piece of infrastructure that's already live and already running in your AWS account, for example. So yeah, the guidelines just provide some extra context for the output. Hey, Rob, did you have a question?
Yeah, Matt. So in terms of these predefined policies that you have, what if I want to leverage my own custom policies?
Yeah, so we do actually support custom policies. I will show you that in a little moment when we get into the Bridgecrew dashboard, because you can then kind of write policies which will go back and kind of recursively scan your own kind of custom policies against any resources that you've kind of scanned previously. So yeah,
Excellent.
Definitely remind me of that when we're in the dashboard. So yeah, this is at the very basics, exactly what we call kind of build time or static analysis infrastructure as code security. I haven't deployed this CloudFormation, and yet we are getting information back about the problems right now. So before I've actually made this infrastructure real, before there's any S3 buckets created, before I have EC2 instances, as a developer, I can go and correct things now rather than trying to remediate things after they've already happened, after there's already insecure items running in my AWS account. So even just running it locally against your repos, either on your own terminal or on, a shared workspace terminal like Cloud9, you can see this is super useful. And you can also see, if we just for completion, if we run Bridgecrew-d dot without all of that, we also get the same outputs, just without kind of sending the results to the cloud. So one thing you will notice if I just run the same thing with the cloud integration again, is we also get with the cloud integration a little link that you might have missed at the bottom of that output. And it's designed to not have to do what I'm doing here, and kind of scrolling through all this and kind of looking at it all in a CLI, which can become a little bit tiresome. And that link will actually send us straight into a code reviews page within our cloud environment. So every time we run that Bridgecrew CLI anywhere, you can see we'll get a new item within our code review screen. So because this is a new account, there's only one. You can see run one. It was run on the CFN Goat repository. The repository was in the master branch. We had some failures. We had 49 security errors reported. And we can click into this and we can get a really good overview of, what's going on in our environment. And as you can see, the format for this, it's just a lot easier to read. And, we have the issue down there. What's the problem? We actually now get a severity, which is good. So we can kind of prioritize based on severity. The more link will take you to that same guideline URL that I was showing from the CLI output. But what we also get is where we have a binary decision. So like, do you know what? Restrict public buckets should be true by default. That's a binary decision that our platform can make, and it will actually suggest fixes like I've highlighted here in green as like a standard diff style format. Which is really, really useful because not only are we giving you the guidance, we're also giving someone the ability to actually go, hey, this is what I need to do to fix this. I just need to add this particular section. What do I mean by, and you can see here, there's a load of things which support fixes, and we'll actually do some live fixes, but tied into your developer workflow with pull requests in an automated fashion a little bit later in the workshop. What do I mean by a binary decision there? Well, obviously, I know that for CloudFormation or for Terraform, if we don't have encryption at rest turned on for an S3 bucket, this is how I turn encryption at rest on for an S3 bucket. However, we have other policies which also kind of enforce security practices, such as resources should be tagged. Now, I don't know your individual company's kind of tagging or ownership policy. So that's not a binary decision. That's not something we're going to offer an automatic remediation for, such as this, because different companies are all going to tag things slightly different. Some might tag with owner, some might tag with project. Tagging is a whole, scoped security conversation in itself. And so we will flag an issue if you have non-tagged items, but we're not going to be able to suggest what everyone's tag should be for that given item. But yeah, where we can, we'll suggest fixes. Now, just something very quickly I'd love to throw in there because it's new and it's super exciting. More of a follow along and watch than a have to do yourselves at home. But if you happen to run VS Code locally as your development IDE, we can actually do the kind of Bridgecrew CLI scan that you've just seen automatically as you open infrastructure as code manifest. So we've checked out the same cfngoat.yaml from the cfngoat repo here, and you'll see that if we hover over these S3 items, you can see that we're actually finding the same issues here. And not only are we highlighting them, we're also allowing those fixes, those diffs you saw, right here in the IDE itself. So if we want to fix that, you can see we can add the specific pieces we need to ensure that that configuration is correct. And you'll see there'll be some other parsing errors in here, from YAML parsers and things. But anything that's generally on the title of a resource is coming from our little checkoff plugin down here. And again, this works on anything that the Bridgecrew CLI can scan. So it works on CloudFormation, it works on Terraform and things like that. So just a very quick segue there, and then back to the workshop. If he can find his workshop. Do we have any questions, Peyton or Yaniv? Or are we all good to continue? I will take that as all good to continue. So that's the simplest format of, using Bridgecrew CLI to just catch issues locally. And because that is just a simple binary, as you've just seen, you can run that yourself on the CLI. You could configure that as a pre-commit hook for your Git workflow. So it would automatically run that when you do a kind of Git commit to prevent you accidentally committing, new vulnerabilities in your infrastructure as code straight in. And otherwise you can even embed it in IDs like VS Code so that you don't need to do that. If you just search for Bridgecrew in the VS Code plugins directory, you should find it. You can also, one of the other cool things about this is it's not a tool which requires you to kind of install a tool and then find like a policy pack. So if you kind of do a Bridgecrew list, you see kind of all the built-in checks that we're checking against with the description and what they do and what kind of resources, for example, Terraform or Kubernetes, that they're scanning against. And we add new checks via the community and via the team here at Bridgecrew. We add new checks to each version of Chekhov. So if you're always running the latest version of Chekhov, either via kind of pip update or in using just the latest in a CI/CD configuration, which we'll see later, you're going to get newer and newer policies. And then last but not least, in this section, you can also specify you only want to scan certain checks. So as I said, each check has an ID. So for example, having my own terminal open is really distracting me at the moment, as you can tell. So here you can say if your organization only cares about specific things, you can either ignore those specific checks, or you can say, I only want to check specific checks. So here you'll see we've only specified 2 check IDs, and the only resources we're getting back are for those 2 check IDs, 55 and 56. There are a lot of them, but it's only those 2 checks rather than the 40-some issues we saw previously. Cool. We can move on. And as we were just saying, we can see that the results have appeared in the Bridgecrew dashboard, which we kind of looked at with this code review here. We also can see them to drill down in the incidents tab. So code reviews kind of gives you a really good use of, hey, that particular run, I ran this command at one point, what was in that? But any outstanding issues from any sources that you integrate into Bridgecrew, and we can integrate the Bridgecrew CLI, we can integrate code pipeline that we'll see in a moment, and things like that. We also collate all outstanding issues. I think I've got far too many tabs running here. Give me a second. Just move that out and move that out. I can hear my Mac fans whirring. So just going to close all those down for a second and bring these back. There we go. 32 gigs of RAM and many cores of i7, and Chrome still enjoys munching RAM. Anyway, moving swiftly on. So yeah, so this is really good for a specific point in time for a specific run, but then we collate all of those issues in the incidents page as well. So here you can drill down kind of even more on grouping incidents by the same type. So for example, ensure no hard-coded secrets exist in EC2 user data. We only have one instance in our CFN Goat repo that we scanned that has that. Again, you can click it and kind of get all the information we'd expect, as well as a history of that incident. Whereas if we look at kind of versioning of S3 buckets, we can see in CFN Goat, there are 3 instances of that. Is that big enough for everyone to see? Yeah. You can see there's 3 instances of that particular thing. So a slightly different view of events. And also in this section, we have rich filters. So you can say, I only care about critical severity issues. You can look at issues which only apply to certain CIS or PCI DSS benchmarks, certain categories such as logging, monitoring. And then as we add more and more sources, you probably saw from getting the API key, we have a lot of different integrations to pull data into Bridgecrew. Then we can filter by those on the incidents tab. So if you only wanted to see something from a specific integration, all the integrations would show up here. At the moment, we only have one because it's the integration we've just added on this fresh account from the Bridgecrew CLI. It seems we have a couple more questions about the dashboard, and rather than kind of jumping around, it probably makes sense to answer those first.
Yeah. Hey, Matt. So one of the questions regarding the dashboard is, does the Bridgecrew dashboard provide a layman's report as script for management? And yeah, I don't think I understood that question quite right, but tying back into my previous question regarding the dashboard as it relates to custom policies, where the predefined policies that you have might not suit my non-binary situations. How would I approach that?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for reminding me of that, Rob.
Yeah,
so
no
first
problem.
of all, for the layman's reports, yeah, so if we click here, we can actually get like CSVs of all the kind of outputs and things like that. But also we have the ability to generate kind of PDF reports for different, as I said, in the filter section, we have the ability to kind of categorize errors by, FedRAMP and PCI DSS and things like that. And we also have the ability to export PDFs kind of showing those issues as well. On the policy side, we have a policies page. And to your question, Rob, all of the policies that are built in are actually here. And you can kind of inspect them, all the default kind of ones built in by Bridgecrew. But you can also add your own. And the way this works is either a kind of policy editor in a policy language, which we've built into the platform, or alternatively, you can use a visual editor. And what this will do is it'll allow you to give you policy name, categories, and then for resource definition, you can basically choose, and we're basically pulling in, you know, Terraform object names, we're pulling in CloudFormation object names, so you can effectively, you know, find the resources you're looking for and then kind of do a if then else statement with kind of, you know, exists, not exists, contains, not contains. And once we have some more items in the dashboard, and once we've got some more integrations, we might create a policy, a custom policy if we've time, just to kind of show that working against like an AMI or something like that. Cool. Right, I think at this point then, let's move on. I've of course closed down our Bridgecrew AWS workshop, so we'll just go back here. And so yeah, that kind of gives us a very quick whistle stop tour of the Bridgecrew dashboard. By all means, do kind of click around in your own time. Utilize the kind of help link there, which will get through to us and the team. Ask us anything, ask us for feature requests. You know, if you're stuck on an issue, as you're going through the workshop, you can use that, or you can kind of join us in Slack if you're doing this offline. And yeah, let's move on. So this is great, right? So I commonly say, and I have a slide somewhere if I can bring it up really quickly. He says, realizing that recents apparently are not recent. So like in terms of kind of running these tools, we've seen kind of running it in the IDE, that's great. And we've seen this kind of, you know, installing this Bridgecrew CLI, which allows us to kind of run it manually or, you know, tie it into something like a pre-commit locally on our machine to stop us adding commits with vulnerable code in them. Is that enough, or, you know, what else should we care about? And I always like to think about the fact that as we get closer to the production environment, we actually have more information which may or may not allow us to trigger more security policies. So for example, CloudFormation has the ability to pull in environment variables from System Manager or from other CloudFormation templates that have exported outputs. If that's being used as a variable in our CloudFormation, we're not going to know until the CloudFormation stage what that variable resolves to. And if that variable resolves to maybe something that's being used in a security group that allows access to the whole internet, so like 0000/0, we are not going to know that as an unresolved variable when we're writing that CloudFormation in our IDE, or writing that Terraform in our IDE, or even in pre-commit, or even in a PR that comes in potentially from someone that doesn't have, you know, access to trigger the CI/CD run. So the closer we get to production, the more variable information, the more kind of resolution we're going to get in our infrastructure as code templates, if they're complex templates using variables and kind of integrated with other items. But also the closer we get to production, the more complexity, the more risky a fix is. You know, the most risky fix is something that's already in runtime. It's already a real item in AWS. So for example, how do you turn encryption on for maybe an RDS database that's unencrypted, but it's already in constant use and things like that? It can be done, but it's more complex than going, hey, I've got a piece of CloudFormation that I've written 2 minutes ago that's in my IDE, like no one knows it exists yet, it's not committed. So obviously it's a lot easier to change things earlier on. So it's important to kind of have really easy developer tools which allow you to run the same set of security policies kind of throughout the life cycle of your deployment pipeline, from writing your infrastructure code right to runtime and after it becomes a real runtime resource, because you just have more chance of kind of making your day easier by catching things early. But also it's important not just to run it early, because we have more information available for the scanning the closer we get to runtime and production.
And Matt,
So
just
sure.
wanted to jump in. Yeah, one of the key benefits of being more proactive than reactive is essentially there's a cost benefit. You're not having to do a lot of testing and development and testing, and that's definitely a big advantage.
Yeah, completely agree. And yeah, we see that we see these tools being used kind of all the way through the pipeline with great effect, and it's actually why kind of the Bridgecrew dashboard, this incident screen, we'll come back to this, but we will start seeing kind of the same violation and the same issues being flagged from multiple sources. So maybe from the code in GitHub, but also from the CI/CD pipeline. And one of the questions that we get is, well, why would we want to see that issue twice? But actually you need to see it twice, because if you just saw it from CI/CD, how do you know when it's corrected at source? How do you know when it's actually fixed in GitHub? Because otherwise, the next time you run that GitHub code through CI/CD, you're just going to put that problem back. So having multiple touch points along your pipeline really helps you visualize your kind of true security posture. So the next module, so we're on module 5 for everyone that's following along. And yeah, completely agree. Like, soak it up, and then this is all available if you want to follow along afterwards. So either way, we've got you covered. Module 5 is kind of about, well, this is great, but what if I have multiple developers all kind of contributing to my code base, which is standard? I don't want to mandate that everyone needs to run the Bridgecrew CLI or use VS Code or install the VS Code plugin. How do we automate this so that there isn't a risk of people kind of skipping these security checks? And the way we're going to do that is we are going to take a clone of CFNGoat. So we're each going to start on our own copy of CFNGoat, which is why we each need a GitHub account. And from there, we're going to set up an AWS CodeBuild pipeline as our kind of CI/CD pipeline for our CFNGoat project. And then we're going to show automating this process so that every time someone commits to that project, or makes a contribution or makes a change, we can see that either getting blocked or allowing through to production based on automation in the CI/CD pipeline. So the first thing we'll need to do is we'll need to go over to the CFNGoat project, and I will put a link in the chat now. We will need to go over here. And for those of you new to this, we'll click the fork button over here. And what this is going to do is this is going to create us our own copy of CFNGoat in our own GitHub account. Now, I've already forked CFNGoat, so I have a local copy. But what you will end up with after a few seconds is your GitHub username /CFNGoat. And that means you can now make changes to this copy. You can edit this copy without having to kind of submit changes back to the Bridgecrew version. And it'll allow us to tie this into your own CI/CD pipeline as if it's your own code project. So once we have that, we're now ready for 5.2, where we're going to go and set up AWS Code Build. And pretty much everything you need to set up AWS Code Build is in this. So you should just be able to follow along with the screenshots. Everything we need is kind of detailed here. But the CodeBuild allows us to do arbitrary things as part of a project build. So it's not just for security. CodeBuild is a CI/CD tool where you can tell it to run your kind of tests against your code base, your Python tests, or your JUnit tests, or your Node tests, or whatever tests you want, or run other tools such as our Bridgecrew security scanner. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through and create this CodeBuild project. And to integrate the Bridgecrew portion, we're actually going to temporarily go back to the integrations page of the Bridgecrew dashboard. And you'll kind of see everything generally starts here. Whatever we're trying to do with security and Bridgecrew, you'll come to the integrations page. So just like we use the API key for the local CLI test, You can see we also have integrations for pretty much everything else we care about. And right now, we want the integration for AWS CodeBuild. There's no current integrations. We're going to click Add Subscription. And what this is going to give us is a command to run and also a build spec. So this is the configuration file for AWS CodeBuild, telling it how to run the Bridgecrew CLI, telling it how to do a security scan so that we can automate that process we just did manually on the CLI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily copy, or you can use the copy button here. And I'm going to use our handy Cloud9 IDE to just create a new file and paste that so we know it's there, even if we kind of move away from this dashboard. And then we have a command we need to run here, number 1. So again, I'm going to press this to copy it. And as kind of Rob mentioned earlier, what's really cool about Cloud9 is we are about to run a command against the AWS CLI. Now, usually I'd have had to go and download my user credentials from AWS and put it in an AWS credentials file. But because we're already logged into our AWS account in this web IDE, all of that is there for me, to the point that I could do AWS, well, anything. I've completely forgotten the command to check what user I'm currently logged in as.
STS, and then get caller identity.
That's
get,
the one.
Yeah, get hyphen
caller identity.
Yep. And you can autocomplete as well, which typically on an EC2 instance, you would have to manually set up autocomplete. But yeah, this is excellent.
Yeah, that helps to have years of AWS experience with you on the webinar, doesn't it? When you forget STS. So thanks, Rob. Appreciate that.
Totally fine. And another benefit is you're leveraging an instance profile, so not leveraging permanent credentials, which is another security best practice. You don't want to leverage access keys wherever you don't have to.
Yeah, and to that point, actually, for those kind of looking how to do that in the wider environment of using AWS, Bridgecrew actually has a blog post on how we manage access to development accounts within Bridgecrew, kind of using a mixture of kind of these temporary roles and integrating with one login. So we have 2FA that then generates as an AWS credentials file that only lasts for a couple of hours, or user configurable, which is really, really cool as well. So we're going to copy and paste this command. And what this is basically going to do is it's going to store a parameter, a named parameter called the Bridgecrew API key, which is the API key we kind of used earlier. And it's going to store this in AWS SSM so that we can have our code pipeline, our CodeBuild CI/CD pipeline, access this key securely. What we wouldn't want to do is write our API key somewhere in the actual definition of what we want CodeBuild to do, because these definitions, just like with any other CI/CD tool, you might actually end up storing this pipeline configuration in the repo itself, just so it's versioned and visible and editable, just like your code. But if this is a public project or a public, thing, or even a private repo, you still might not want all of your development team kind of seeing your API key exposed there for anyone to read. So by putting it as a parameter in a secure store, we can give CodeBuild permissions to access this. But it stops it being, embedded in kind of world readable, potentially, configuration. And that's just a common thing, whether you're running AWS SSM for parameters, whether you're, not storing secrets directly in your Kubernetes manifest and you're instead putting them into a secret store. Just common good security practice to not store keys where you store your configuration. So once we've done that, and I'm just going to try and move my Zoom bar out of the way because it's really annoying me now. Nope, apparently not. I'm going to move things down here a little bit. There we go. Right, so once we've done that, we will go ahead and create our CodeBuild project. So we can click this handy link here to go and open a tab straight at AWS CodeBuild if we were still signed on to our console. I am just going to go and dig out the... Hey, could someone send me the Event Engine login page again, please, just so I can jump into another tabs. Oh, there we go. It did it anyway. Sorry, that was me getting ahead of myself. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and find CodeBuild. We're going to check that we're in the right region. Did we want to be in US West 2 or US East 2? Rob or Yaniv?
That was US West 2.
Perfect. So we're in the right region. And then we can go ahead and follow the workshop instructions. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new CodeBuild project. We're going to call it Bridgecrew tutorial, which again, we can copy. And what we're going to do is attach this to GitHub. And this basically allows us to access the the repo that we've just cloned. So all the screenshots are here, and we'll just kind of follow along with this. So if we create a build project, we're going to call it that. You can, be whimsical with your description if you like. It does not really matter. And what we're going to do here, you can see there's multiple sources. So if you were using AWS Code Commit, you could pull your code from there, or Bitbucket or GitHub Enterprise. But CFNGoat that we've just forked is in GitHub. So we'll authenticate with GitHub, and we'll click connect to GitHub and just follow this workflow through. So what we have here is, authorize AWS Code Suite. I'm just going to plug in my 2FA token. With the fiddly USB-C. I'm also very close to my wired network connection here, so I'm being super careful not to abruptly end this webinar. There we go. Fantastic. And once we're connected to our GitHub account, give it a sec. There we go. It's saying, do we want a public repository or do we want a repository in our GitHub account? Well, technically it is public because we forked a public repo, but this allows us to nice and easily search for it. So what I can do is I can find CFNGoat, and we can find the version we just cloned, which for my case is my GitHub username, which is MetaHuts, and CFNGoat. So we'll pick that one. And then we will refer to our instructions. So we have Bridgecrew tutorial. We've connected to GitHub and gone through this connection flow. We have specified a repository in our GitHub account. We have found our CFNGoat repository. And then we will pick managed image, and we kind of just go with these. This is basically asking what kind of Linux operating system and what default tooling image you want to run your CI/CD pipeline on. We're just picking an Ubuntu default. We're picking the kind of CodeBuild standard 4.0 image. I think 5 is available now, but we'll go with 4 because we've tested this environment. And then we're allowing it to create a new service role, and that service role we'll come to in a minute and is very important. So here we go. We managed image, Ubuntu, runtime standard, image 4, latest version, Linux, and new service role. There we go. Now, what we can do here is, like I said, you can store the build spec, which is going to tell it's going to tell the code build pipeline exactly what to do. That can be a directory path from your repository itself, or for our case, we can just directly insert this. We can directly insert this into our configuration here as we create the code pipeline. So you can see here what we're doing is we're going to say insert build commands. We're going to click switch to editor, and that's going to allow us to just paste this in. Now, if this CFN Goat project was a project that I actually wanted to deploy and I knew I was going to be using it forever with my kind of code build pipeline, yeah, the correct choice there would be to store our file within our Git repo. But this is a really nice quick way of kind of setting this up and testing. So we'll switch to the editor. We'll delete all of the example. And this is where we want to take our, here we go. This is where we want to take the integration data we copied from the Bridgecrew dashboard, this file, and we want to place it into here. And again, you only need to do this once when you're setting up the CI/CD pipeline, and then it's stored in this new code build pipeline configuration. And at this point, we can click create build project. Now, one thing I said we were just going to come back to during that code build creation, we just said let it create its own set of roles, right, for the code build pipeline. And the reason that's important is that role is going to define the kind of security context which this code build pipeline runs as within AWS. So by default, that will have a number of permissions. But what it won't have is permission to access that secret containing our API key that we installed by running the command earlier. So by default, there's no way that this code build instance we've just created would be allowed to access that key. So again, one time only thing we need to do is go to the IAM dashboard within AWS where all of our roles are stored. And again, there's a link directly to it, as you just saw from the instructions. And we need to go and find the IAM role that CodeBuild has created for us. And because we know what we called our CodeBuild instance, the naming should be fairly easy. So we can copy that. We can put it in the search box, and we'll find our CodeBuild role here. What we'll do is we'll go into here and we'll basically add extra security privileges to that role so that the CI/CD pipeline can access that, that shared item. So we click add inline policy. And again, if you're following along later, this is all documented in the workshop. We'll add an inline policy. And what we're doing is creating an access for systems manager for the get parameter and get parameters actions. So in here, systems manager, get parameter and get parameters. There we go. And then the next thing we need to know is what specific resources, what exact object parameter within systems manager do we want to be able to access. So to do that, we can either copy the account ID of the Amazon account and the region and the name of the key we've saved, and it will build this ARN for us. Or if you still have your Cloud9 environment up, you can actually see a lot of the information you'll need here to do it that way. But you can also just run a command to retrieve that key and get the exact ARN of that object that we can paste straight in. So let's do it that way. So you can see here, we have this SSM get parameter, again, utilizing the fact that we already have authentication configured in this Cloud9 CLI. And then you can see we have the ARN of the item we need there. We can copy that and we can paste it straight back into too many tabs.
And while you're doing that, Matt, I just wanted to provide some context as to why we're doing this, providing access to a specific SSM parameter as opposed to just blanket access to all. So this is following the policy of least privilege, and it's a recommended AWS practice and just overall, best practice to follow. And yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Because by default, if you just left that blank or put a star there, suddenly this CI/CD pipeline would have access to all the parameters in your parameter store, potentially for that region, which might cover projects and other applications that just have no business having access to those secrets. Yeah, least privilege is definitely what we're going for. I've also provided a copy and pastable name for this inline policy, which we just copied in there, and we've hit create policy. So now we have this extra policy in here, this inline policy, which will allow the build to access our secret. Cool. Build pipeline housekeeping done. We can actually now trigger that. So a code build pipeline here, we can click start build, and that's going to do exactly what we want it to do. Basically, that is going to check out the latest copy of master from our Fort CFN Goat repository. It's going to install automatically in the worker that's powering this code build instance. It's going to go and install the Bridgecrew CLI, make sure Python's available, etc. It's going to go and get our API key so that the Bridgecrew CLI can send the data to the Bridgecrew dashboard like we did manually in the first step. And then it's going to scan that repo, the CFN Goat repo, and report any issues. And this is great because now we have a way of doing this automatically rather than having to manually run all those steps. You can see there it's pip3 installing Bridgecrew. This will all be very familiar from what we saw on the CLI, but we have an automated, repeatable way of doing this. Not particularly going to watch this happen. But again, you could look at the output in the CLI here, but this is exactly why the integration ties back into Bridgecrew, because we will see that show up in incidents. We'll also see that show up as a new code review item. So that, even if there's 1,000 deploys a day, you're not going staring through CLI output. You've got a nice single dashboard for all your infrastructure as code security incidents. The next section we have here is code pipeline. So what code pipeline allows us to do is a trigger for, you can kind of string multiple code build projects together, but you can also trigger them based on events. So potentially external events like webhooks, or for example, like GitHub saying, hey, someone's just raised a pull request, someone's just committed a new item to master. So code pipeline and code build work together, and code pipeline is going to allow us to automatically trigger this code build instead of me hitting the build now button like I have just done. Code pipeline is going to allow us to make sure this happens automatically every time this is running. So you can see we get the same output we were expecting locally. And if we go into the Bridgecrew dashboard and look at our code reviews, we'll see a new code review here. And because of the new integration, you'll see that this is named based on our code build pipeline. So we can once again click into that and kind of see all the expected data. And again, with the useful information. And this will also have updated in our incidents page, where not only will we now see, and again, kind of highlighting that we show all the violations from each step of the integrations. We can see the original one from our CLI, but we can also see the one from our CI/CD pipeline, showing up as well. And that will allow us to filter on those sources because we have a new source. So there's our AWS account, there's our code build pipeline ID. So we can say, hey, I just want to see issues from those for now. We get them all there. If we have a look in integrations in AWS code build, you can add as many of these as you want by just going and copying this and doing it again, and you will always get a new integration with the name of your code build pipeline. And it took a moment to show up there, but you can also see it shows how many integrations you have and what the AWS account ID is and the name of the pipeline as well.
Matt,
So
I have a short question here.
Sure.
For you, and also wanted to say something. So first, you mentioned integrations now, and I just wanted to call out and to get your kind of perspective about this as well. We are, just the fact that we're running this workshop on AWS, leveraging AWS CI/CD technologies like the code pipeline or code build. There are still other ways to do this. We understand that developers out there are using different tools like Jenkins or other CI platforms. So can you cover for a moment just what are the integrations that you have in that aspect?
Yeah, by all means. So here we have a few different styles of integrations, and they're kind of split into 3 sections. So cloud providers. So we will come on to this, kind of looking at running the same security checks against real running infrastructure. So right now we're showing it against CloudFormation and Terraform. We also have the ability to say, hey, something did actually make it into your AWS account. This is a real runtime resource. And in fact, let's go ahead and integrate this with our AWS account now so we can kind of see some of the results of that. So if we click on the run to the cloud provider integration and click launch stack, and by all means, go ahead and do this yourselves. What this is going to do is it's going to link us into our AWS account, and it's going to create a least privilege read-only CloudFormation from Bridgecrew, which is going to enable connection between the AWS account and Bridgecrew. And that's going to allow Bridgecrew to automatically scan your real cloud resources. So if something has made it through perhaps existing things from before you started your kind of infrastructure as code journey, or before you started security scanning your infrastructure as code, this is going to kind of put your mind at ease and kind of catch any issues that are currently in your AWS account. So once that has created, just like all the other integrations on the Bridgecrew dashboard, we'll see a green tick, we'll see details of the integration here, and then we'll start to see incidents in that filter tab against your AWS account, and we'll start to see things coming up highlighted as a cloud incident rather than a CI/CD or a local CLI incident. So they're kind of the cloud provider sections, and live Kubernetes workloads from a cluster kind of ties into that runtime scanning. We can see there that the read-only integration is coming online. Then we have source control. Source control is an interesting one because a lot of source control providers like kind of GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, etc., actually provide more than just somewhere to host Git. They have kind of customizations like pull requests and things like that, which through GitHub integration, for example, we can automatically scan pull requests coming in, which is incredibly valuable because instead of scanning the whole repo, we can just say, hey, this pull request actually is about to expose one new security issue. So that's source control. And then the third type, which is kind of what you were talking about, is continuous integration. So we try and support as many CI/CD pipelines as possible. And this is what we just saw with CodeBuild, the idea that when you are running your development CI/CD pipeline, there will be a Bridgecrew step somewhere in there that is going to not only find those issues before you kind of deploy to prod, but it's going to report those into the Bridgecrew dashboard as well. And then the final type of integrations and notifications. So we have kind of Slack, Jira, and Splunk by default. So if you wanted to alert the dev team that that CI/CD run did fail because of Bridgecrew finding a violation, and you don't want your developer team to have to find yet another dashboard to look at every day, you can integrate into their tooling and their pipeline so that they're not having to switch between new web interfaces and dashboards. We also have a set of APIs on our docs, which allow you to programmatically access kind of incidents and scans and things as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love this because I talk to so many customers about closing the loop because once again, I said, I don't care exactly what you use, if you use GitHub, if you want to use code commit, but the important thing here that there's kind of the three facets of making sure that you're developing and deploying applications in speed. CI is one, CD is the second, and infrastructure as code is the third. And we're talking about CI here. And one of the important things with CI is closing the loop, making sure that you're finding these things throughout your pipelines. You're building and testing that code in a consistent manner. And when I say consistent, I mean also the testing part, also security, making sure that you're not introducing new vulnerabilities. And then lastly, you have to close the loop, either fail the build, or alert on these problems. So that's when customers talk to me about how do we do this at speed, or how do we build speed into our development lifecycle. This is how you do it. You implement these tools to help you find the problems as left as we can, like as early as we can, and not introduce them in the first place. So yeah, thanks for all that overview there.
Hey, no worries at all. And in fact, I think just because we're on that topic, I think in the interest of time, we're probably going to just very quickly kind of skip over the pipeline setup. What the pipeline would give us is the ability to automatically trigger the scan every time there was a change in GitHub. And it would basically stop me having to click build now in CodeBuild. But in the interest of time for kind of jumping into some of the other items, I'll just tell you when code pipeline would have triggered that, and we will jump into some of the other bits. So while we are still in the Bridgecrew dashboard, and while we're still on the integrations page, after integrating AWS read-only, we're actually going to go ahead and integrate GitHub as source control. So once again, in the GitHub integration, if we click authorize, you'll be taken very similar to the CloudBuild. You'll be taken to a GitHub authorization panel. And what we're going to do here, I've already got the Bridgecrew app authorized on my GitHub account, so this will look slightly different. The screenshots are in the workshop. You will basically be asked if you want to allow Bridgecrew permission, which repos, if you're sensitive about never exposing certain repositories in your account to third-party tools, you can be very selective, or you can allow all. And once we save that, we'll be redirected back to Bridgecrew, and we'll see this new pop-up asking which repos we want to scan. And in this case, I'm going to do CFN Goat, and I'm also going to do TerraGoat just because I like all of the Goat projects. Okay. And so you might be thinking, well, we already have access to the code for scanning through the CodeBuild pipeline we've just set up. Why would we also want to integrate with GitHub directly? And to Yanni's point, it's closing the loop and kind of having sensors at each point in that loop. They allow us to do very different things. If you think about a CI/CD pipeline, that is really the only place which can authoritatively stop something going to production. That is where your tests fail and stop the build. If you have full CI/CD implemented, if all the tests pass, that change is going into production. So CI/CD is a great place not only to report on issues making it through the CI/CD pipeline, but also saying, no, hang on, stop, we have a security issue. Whereas scanning things in source control gives us a different perspective on things. As I said, it gives us the ability to see inbound pull requests and maybe make suggestions right then. And we can kind of show this really, really easily, actually. So if I was to, here we go. If I was to just go to github.com and go to my CFN Goat clone, and kind of find my CFN Goat, and you can follow along with this or not. It's completely up to you. If I go and edit this file and create another piece of vulnerable CloudFormation, so My favorite are always S3 buckets, because I'm pretty sure everyone that's worked in infrastructure security has found a exposed S3 bucket somewhere in their career. So I'm going to go and find some more S3 changes in here. There we go. And I'm going to create a new bucket. So I'm going to take an existing bucket and I'm going to really unoriginally, whoops, I keep doing that, don't I? I'm going to really unoriginally call it data bucket 2. Trying to be very careful with, should have done this in an IDE, shouldn't I? That'll teach me. There we go. I'm going to call this data bucket 2. It's of type AWS S3 bucket. It's probably very insecure because data bucket was insecure. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, let's create this on a new branch so that I can create a pull request. And the new pull request is going to say, hey, yeah, I want to bring this new bucket into the environment. And so what we really want with the GitHub integration is, yeah, this isn't in CI/CD because this is a pull request. It's not even got close enough to master to the going through the full CI/CD process that your company might have. But we still want to know and help the developers thinking about reviewing or merging this pull request as to as to whether there is an issue here. So what will happen with Bridgecrew integration through the GitHub integration we've just done is we'll get some feedback in here to help developers go, hey, actually, for this reason, this particular change is going to add more security issues to your repo, and it's going to allow people to fix this while it's not even in your infrastructure as code, while it's still just a pull request, while it's not actually impacting anything. And so you can see we've failed on some of these. We've got issues. We should also be getting annotations here with a little Bridgecrew comment providing us context and information, but we'll come back to that in a moment. I'm just very wary of time. It's very possible because I committed a pull request onto my own repo rather than coming from external. Let me just double check that. When you select which repositories you want to scan, you can see we have automated pull request comments here. And I have CFN goat selected. Cool. Yeah. In the background, James, if you're about, do you want to just try forking my fork of CFNGO and try raising a pull request against it with a little bit of with a new S3 bucket copied and pasted? We'll kind of come back to that and just see if we can see that annotation on the pull request.
Okay, I'll try and create something.
Thank you very much. Just want to kind of show people that because it is kind of cool. To just very quickly, live demos, God love them, complete the loop on that. If we go to, for example, one of our demo accounts, so try Bridgecrew, which has this integration, and we look at some of the pull requests, we can actually see, let's try this. Here we go. So we can actually see here the Bridgecrew bot not just failing one of the tests, but actually annotating here with that integration and saying, hey, you're about to add, these issues by accepting this pull request. So that allows us to say, do you know what, we're going to close that pull request instead of allowing those new security issues into the repo. So there's some of the things that, it's that whole closing the loop as to why you'd want to integrate with wherever your code is being stored and where your CI/CD pipeline's happening, and then runtime as well. Where is my, there we go. And so, yeah, our pipeline, as I said, we've kind of skipped that in the interest of time, but that would have just automatically kicked off the build now button, like I've said. And what that would give us is what we can see in the code build pipeline. So just like we saw when we ran it locally, we get a, here we go, sorry. We get a failure here. And we can click into that. We already saw the kind of CLI output, but we can also get a report because the Bridgecrew integration kind of generates a JUnit XML format, which is quite a common kind of testing report format. So instead of having to read through the CLI, even if you're not integrating with Slack, even if you're not jumping back and forward into the Bridgecrew dashboard, you get a simplified view of how many of the security infrastructure tests passed and failed, and a list of them down here as well. So that's quite useful as well, just if you're within the code build environment.
Matt, you have a PR to accept.
Wonderful. Let's go and have a look at that, shall we? That was awfully quick, James. That's very impressive, considering I just dropped that on you at random.
You haven't seen it yet.
Oh dear, I'm worried now. Is it safe for sharing on screen?
We call it code roulette.
Like it. Okay, so oh. I am not seeing your pull request. Is it to Bridgecrew CFN Go?
It's TerraGoat, not CFN Go.
Sorry, my fault.
Don't ask me to do CloudFormation on the fly.
So for those of you that don't know James, he's a very active member and module maintainer for Terraform. So yeah, understandable he would have picked TerraGoat there. Cool. So here we go from James Wolfenden. He's added a new S3 bucket. We can see we have failed, but again, for some reason, we're not seeing the Bridgecrew annotation. So I will have a look as to why that's not happening against my my fork. It's possible that it's because I don't have a new fork and it's integrated with about 6 other accounts that we have that I've been using for demos. But by all means, do let me know in the chat what your experience is if you're following along. That would be great. In the interest of time, we will plow through and just chalk that one up to the demo gods. So yeah, we can see that we have this within CI/CD. And to Yaniv's point earlier about people running different CI/CD systems, if you wanted to enable exactly the same pipeline, kind of feeding that per run information into the Bridgecrew code review screen, just like we have here, but with GitHub Actions, we have a GitHub Actions example. I'm going to close that down. We have a GitHub Actions example as 5.6 as well. So by all means, follow through that while you have CFN Go cloned, while you have your account access and things from this demo. By all means, if that is something you're interested in, go and give that a try. Very similar. There's pipeline configuration, and the pipeline configuration gets saved, and that builds your pipeline against that repo. So the next thing I wanted to look at, and it's another reason why it's important to integrate with source control. So for example, the GitHub integration we just did. The CI/CD pipeline is super important. CodeBuild is super important because that's the place you can stop a build making it to production. You can go, hey, there's no way I'm letting this make it to production. And, for that reason, if you just had your code scanning in your Git repo, you wouldn't have that ability to take like policy action on, what doesn't make it to production. If someone accidentally merged a PR into Git, you want that kind of ability to stop at your CI/CD pipeline. However, a CI/CD pipeline isn't a source of truth. Your Git repo is a source of truth. So we've showed throughout the dashboard and throughout a few things in this workshop how we can kind of produce fixes. Now, if those fixes are in VS Code at the start of your journey, then great. You know, that's never going to be a problem because you fixed it before it became a Git commit. But you're never going to want the CI/CD pipeline to automatically add fixes, because the CI/CD pipeline is after the source of truth, which is your Git repo. So if something is broken in your code stored in Git, it doesn't matter how many times your CI/CD pipeline maybe enables that fix. The code is still bad in Git. So every time you are running that deployment, you're effectively still running that insecure code. And so for that reason, we enable, once there is source control integration, we enable active fixes from the incident page. So for example, if I go ahead and find some trusty S3 vulnerabilities. So yeah, I don't know, what's my favorite? Securely encrypted at rest, I always go for. And you can see here, again, we have highlights coming from our original scan. We have some that have been automatically picked up in TerraGoat because we integrated that into GitHub. We have CFNGoat, and it's all the same resource, just coming from multiple places. So we can see that it made it to our CI/CD system, and our CI/CD run actually stopped the run because of these issues. But if I tried to fix that in CI/CD, I'm still not fixing it where it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed at the source. So for that same issue, for that data science bucket, if I select the data science bucket for our GitHub integration, you'll see this is what we are recommending to change. Okay. And if it is something that we are happy creating an automatic pull request for, some results are, some results are not, you'd actually be able to click fix, and this would actually create a PR showing your developers what we were trying to automatically remediate. So for example, if I select, the demo gods really aren't with me today, are they? Why are the demo gods not with me, James? What's going on?
Yeah.
If we kind of select, here we go, this example here. So versioning needs to be enabled in TerraGoat. If we are confident that that is an absolute binary fix that will not cause any issues, and that is the only way of doing it, and it requires no user intervention, no like choosing an encryption scheme or anything like that, we will actually allow a security admin or a developer with access to our dashboard to literally go and do that and click fix, and that will create a pull request against our repo to permanently fix that issue. And then once that's remediated, if we come and look in here, we have this new issue, which includes kind of details and the guideline links that we showed at the beginning of this session, shows the file involved, and just kind of tries to provide, as we said earlier, that mission of kind of providing a, you know, virtual security advocate on your team to be like, hey, this is why this should be fixed. And you can see that the changes are exactly what we saw in the dashboard before we hit fix. So just another example of kind of why it's important to have different integrations at different points of the life cycle. Was there another question, Rob?
Yeah, there was a question in the chat about support for if there's support for JSON based yeah, there's like, the question is around CloudFormation templates, if there's support for JSON based templates or if it's just YAML based.
Yeah, quote me on this. I cannot remember whether it's a released feature or a soon to be released feature. Actually caught me out on that one. But yes, we do support JSON formats, or will do very, very soon.
Excellent.
Cool. And then kind of completing that life cycle. So we've kind of covered, we jumped ahead a little bit while we were already there to integrate with GitHub, because that gave us the ability to do the PR fixes. and also did the annotated pull requests, which I showed you one from a different repo, but sorry about, I've potentially messed up my integration there. We've kind of showed the pull request fixes, but the other really cool thing we did when we were in integrations was do the AWS read-only integration. And this allows us to do exactly the same for kind of brownfield environments that maybe objects running in your AWS account before you adopted infrastructure as code or before you started security scanning infrastructure as code. Not only can we see issues that made it to production, again, when there is a binary change we can enable, you can actually enable the AWS remediation stack if you are happy with Bridgecrew having access to your AWS account, which is why there's two, by the way. So read-only is just the minimum privileges we need to securely scan your resources. If you are happy to enable fixes, you can then go ahead and add the remediation stack as well, which will enable that fix icon for runtime issues. So we might not have time to get to see this through to an actual fix, because I would love Rob and Yaniv to just talk a little bit about AWS account setup, but we'll go ahead and kick that off anyway. But yeah, so with either just the read-only or with the remediation stack installed, what we're going to start seeing in incidents is not only our CI/CD vulnerabilities, not only things that have been picked up from our original CLI scan and the two repos that I told via the GitHub integration to scan. If we hide all those, we literally just get an account number, and this is our AWS integration directly. This is our runtime integration, and we can, in the integrations page, give that a friendlier name if you want to name it as, you know, not the account ID of your AWS account. And what we're going to start seeing, I'm currently searching for S3, but it's finding one runtime issue on that S3 search. And what this is basically saying is ensure a logging and metric filter alarm exists for S3 bucket policy changes. So again, this is looking at security best practices of your runtime environment. So, and obviously because these are brand new event engine and they're designed for dev days and for kind of, you know, hacking around in the AWS environment, it's not going to be set up with a, you know, secure lockdown posture. But these are things you would want to know if this is an account you actually care about for prod or dev or test in AWS. And it kind of follows along the AWS kind of security guidelines. So make sure we get an alert if someone signs in without an MFA to the dashboard. Make sure an alert if someone tries to change an IAM policy so that a security admin can go and make sure that that's not an attempt to, you know, use an exploit and then gain more privileges because they're able to edit an IAM policy. Make sure that the default VPC isn't being used. And then again, you get to see all the resources that we found attached to those VPCs and things like that. So again, some of these will be fixable if you enabled the remediation. Ensure MFA is enabled for the root account. For example, ensure password policies are set to expire passwords over 90 days, things like that. All very sensible things. But, you know, if you don't have a dedicated security person in your DevSecOps team, having a list of these and having the ability to see the guidelines and the what and the why, along with your code, you know, it just completes that loop of seeing things that are, you know, problematic in runtime. Now, these might not just be things that are default AWS account settings. These might actually be your applications that have been deployed. So if we did have an insecure S3 bucket that had made it in there, that would be flagged up in here. So you can catch things from before your kind of codified security journey started, kind of brownfield things, as I've said. But just talking about kind of default AWS setups, there are things that AWS provides which can be used to kind of massively reduce the kind of to-do list of default AWS setups to make sure there are guardrails and kind of secure defaults in place for new AWS accounts. And I'd love to close out with any of the questions as well. I'll kind of answer them in chat as we go through, but I'd love to hand over to Yaniv and Rob to kind of talk us through some of the things that we can do to make our default AWS accounts more secure.
Yeah. Let me just correct you on one thing, Matt. We do care about what you found for our event engine accounts, and we'd love to see what we can, kind of remediate for events. Obviously, we're not going to ask all the participants to go through MFA,
Right.
but other things like the flow logs maybe make sense, or the buckets, because we do have some events that we run with buckets. So thanks for that. And I think this ties in to something that we talk about quite often, which is guardrails. Um, Whenever you have, when you're setting up multiple accounts, like you have your production account, you have your staging account, you have your developer account, and everybody's getting access to these accounts. But as an organization, one of the things you're worried about, happy and worried about, is scale. Like what happens now if we start spinning up hundreds of AWS accounts, or we're migrating our workloads to the cloud from on-prem, and we're afraid to lose control. And using guardrails and kind of setting some sort of landing zone for our AWS environment is something very important. We can use things like Control Tower to do that, or other AWS services for it. But the idea is that if we use Bridgecrew and we find all these vulnerabilities on that one account, that one proof of concept that we're doing for ourselves, we can later on apply that automatically to any other account or any other environment that we're setting up within AWS. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's just one of those things that enables speed. um, I was a developer and an enterprise developer for quite a while, and security was always perceived as that team that comes in and sends us a huge Excel file and tells us go remediate right now after the fact, and then we stop everything, we stop developing, we're not building any features for the next 2 quarters because we have to fix our security issues. Where here, we're kind of saying, okay, your security team is basically now feeding these vulnerabilities into the early stages of you setting up the environment. So everything that's being configured here and told by Bridgecrew, either out of the box policies or by policies that we write ourselves, and kind of tells us what to do with our environments. So I think it's a perfect solution for speed, for guardrails, and definitely looking at the vulnerabilities that you found here for these AWS accounts, extremely valuable. I mean, I can't tell you how many incidents we've been hearing about people. All of a sudden, we don't have access to our account anymore. We don't know our passwords. Somebody left the company. Now, what are we going to do? So avoiding that, and you'll be surprised that these things still happen, but they happen a lot. So avoiding all these things, using the solution is absolutely great.
Cool. Yeah, and it's something we've talked about, Yaniv, as well. Kind of, yeah, spending some time kind of doing some cool things, maybe with some CloudFormation templates and based on these results. So maybe watch out for next time when I've fixed my pull request demo and we've got some of these kind of codified.
Yeah.
Awesome. There is one other thing that I kind of forgot to mention as a bit of a shameless plug for a little bit of a swag promotion we've got going on. I don't know about everyone else on this call, but I kind of miss swag from the fact that none of us have traveled to conferences for about a year now. So one of the other cool things we actually do with the integrations, which is a fairly new feature, is we're actually trying to promote security of, securely writing CloudFormation, securely writing Terraform. So on a given repo, we're actually now providing kind of Git style README badges, which will dynamically update based on any issues we find and how many violations and whether they do or don't apply to different compliance tests we run for. So for example, you can find a TerraGoat badge. You can get an infrastructure security TerraGoat badge to embed in your repo. And we are currently running a little bit of a swag competition. If you do manage a Terraform module, CloudFormation module, or you just have a public repo that does have infrastructure as code, if you want to add a badge to show your kind of compliance with infrastructure as code security, do go to event/capture the swag, and we will send you a Bridgecrew kind of infrastructure as code ambassador swag pack to say thank you very much for that.